Now, we've discussed what not to do, but what to do, right? But now, if you look at this diagram, this is honestly a really good diagram that I, I mean, the way I was taught this topic with this diagram, it was eye-opening. So hopefully inshallah, I can do it the same justice. May Allah help me. But this is taken from one of Dr. Israr's books. You have every right to disagree with it as far as like the opinion part goes. But and I won't go too deep into it because I'm not the most well versed in it. Like, I'm just being honest. And B, this is like, if you want to see the actual references, the ayat, the ahadith, all of that behind this, I will share this book. It isn't a very long book. It's like, what, 18 pages? Yeah. But it's a genuinely good read. This is the name. Deeni Faraiz ka Jamai Tasawwur. It's in Urdu, so that might be a bit of a access issue. But honestly, it's a really good book. Like, if for truly understanding this topic, it's a very good book. So I'll do my best to explain it with the help of this diagram. Okay. Oops, right. Okay. So consider this to be a building. Okay? Like, sure, this isn't a very good building, but we'll start from the foundation, right? Now, the foundation has two parts. One that is below the ground, and one that is like just on the ground, on the surface of the ground, right? On the surface of the ground here, look at this, like the very bottom of the dark part, the black or the dark gray part, right? So it says three things. This dotted line, by the way, this dashed line, sorry, is considered the surface of the ground. So the light gray part below it is the part of the foundation that is below the ground, and everything else that is above the ground. Okay. So if you look at the dark gray part that is above this dashed line, it says three things. It says iqrarum bil lisan, shahadat, and then says shahadat an la ilaha illallahu Muhammadun Rasulullah. Abduhu Rasulullah, sorry. And Qanuni Iman meaning legal Iman. This is the debate of Islam versus Iman that we did. So Qanuni Iman means Islam, not Iman, not true Iman. Okay. And then if you look below the ground, we see Tasdeequm bil Qalb. We see this ayah from Surah Al-Hujurat, which is إنما المؤمنون الذين آمنوا بالله ورسوله ثم لم يرتابوا وجاهدوا بأموالهم وأنفسهم في سبيل الله أولئك هم الصادقون. And then we see إيمان حقيقي. Now إيمان حقيقي is the counterpart of قانوني إيمان, legal إيمان, in the Islam Iman debate. So if Qanuni Iman is Islam, Iman Haqiqi is true Iman. Like, that's actually in the heart. Okay. So when we say Iqrarum bil lisan, or like saying, declaring your Iman, your Islam with your tongue. Now, actually, let me explain the diagram a bit. Consider the under the ground parts, the light gray parts, to be what is batin, something that isn't visible, something that's hidden, right? What's in your heart, no one knows but you and Allah. It's between you and Allah. So everything below is what's hidden, what's in your heart, and everything above the dotted line is what's visible, what's open for everyone to see. So iqrarum bil lisan, what you declare with your tongue, that is open for everyone to see, for everyone to witness, basically. And what are you supposed to do? What are you supposed to declare with your tongue? Ashhadu an la ilaha illallahu wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. That Allah is the like there's no God, there's no ilah, there's no true God, deity, except Allah, and that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the abd, and this is important, abd first, and then Rasulullah, then the Rasul of Allah, the servant, and then the Prophet of Allah. And then your legal iman. This is basically legal iman. So once you declare this with your tongue, you are legally a Muslim. You are legally under, if in an Islamic state, you are legally a first-class citizen because you're a Muslim, and that is a whole different debate that I will not open right now because that's a very long topic. But this is to be discussed in Surah Hujurat if you actually go through it. Anyways, sorry. So this is legal iman. Once you say this, you're Muslim. You're legally Muslim. Whether you're a munafiq or a true believer or someone who's weak in their faith or someone who's just accepted Islam, doesn't matter. Legally, in this world, in matters of this world, you are Muslim and you will be given all the rights of a Muslim. Now, the hidden part, that's the tasdeequn bil qalb. This we can't judge in this world. What is truly in your heart, no one can know but you and Allah. But what you're supposed to attest to, what you're supposed to testify to in your heart is this ayah. إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا بِاللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ. That indeed the believers are only, إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ. The believers are only those, the mu'mineen are only those, الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, those who believe, billahi, on Allah, وَرَسُولِهِ, and on His Messenger. ثُمَّ لَمْ يَرْتَابُوا, and those who يَرْتَابُوا. This is actually a good opportunity to open the correct translation so that I don't make a mistake. This was Surah Al-Hujurat, ayah 15, if I'm not mistaken. Surah Al-Hujurat is 49 and 15. Yeah. So, yartabu is, okay, so they don't fall into shak, into doubt. They don't doubt. Once they've believed, they believe with full conviction. There's no doubt in their belief. ثُمَّ لَمْ يَرْتَابُوا, they don't doubt once they've believed. وَجَاهَدُوا, and they strive, they do jihad. بِأَمْوَالِهِمْ, with their wealth. وَأَنفُسِهِمْ, and with their selves. فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ, in the way of Allah. أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الصَّادِقُونَ, and these are the truthful. These are the ones who testify to the truth. They are the صادقون, not صادقين. Right? This is true iman. If you truly believe this and attest to this and testify to this in your heart, then, and only then, like you need to understand that this is the definition of a mu'min. What do? آمَنُوا بِاللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ ثُمَّ لَمْ يَرْتَابُوا, they don't fall, they believe in Allah and His Messenger, they don't fall into doubt. وَجَاهَدُوا بِأَمْوَالِهِمْ وَأَنفُسِهِمْ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ, and they strive, they make effort, they do jihad in the way of Allah. If you don't do this, then you're not mu'min. You're not hakiki iman. The true iman is not there. Right? These are the two aspects of iman. Purely iman. We study 5 pillars of Islam, right? That iman, salah, Saum, zakat, and hajj. Dr. Israr slightly changes it. He says iman isn't actually a pillar, because that would mean it's equivalent to the others, right? It's not. Iman is actually the foundation. If iman isn't there, the rest of the 4 can't be there. It doesn't make sense. Like even if like visibly you see them there, but there's no iman, then I'm sorry, but they're not actually in effect there, right? So iman is actually the foundation of this building. And then the remaining 4 are the pillars. Namaz, salah, saum, roza, fasting, zakat, like the obligated charity, and hajj, pilgrimage. These are the 4 pillars of Islam. Now, this is supposed to be a 3-story building. On the first story, you are supposed to become a servant of Allah yourself. The first stage of, call it jihad, the first stage of like Islamic obligations of Deeni Faraiz is to be a servant of God yourself, to make sure that everything in your life is aligned and not in conflict with Allah and His Deen. And this will cover jihad against, primarily you could call it like jihad against your nafs, right? But if you like actually look into it and you sort of go a bit deeper, it's jihad against 3 things primarily. One, it's against yourself. So your nafs will tell you to sleep when it's time to pray. Your nafs will tell you to, not pay zakat, or maybe, try and not pay as much zakat. Maybe instead of 2.5%, you could live you could live with 2% or 1.5%. Nafs will say that because your nafs likes the wealth. It likes the luxuries of life, right? Your nafs will tell you not to fast because it wants to eat, because it wants to have relations, sexual relations. Your nafs will obviously tell you not to go to Hajj because it's tiring and it takes up money and it's, it's just a whole thing, because why would you want to do that? So primarily, on step 1, you have to do jihad against your nafs. You have to control your nafs. And how will you control your nafs? Through Quran and jihad. You see this line in the middle, this gray line in the middle? This is the tool for everything, basically, at all stages. If you want to complete the obligations of your deen, then Quran and jihad are the 2 tools that you need to completely build your life around. Okay. So, we did the jihad against nafs. Now, the nafs doesn't work alone. Something that constantly adds fuel to the fire is shaitan. Right? His goal is making you forfeit your actual obligations, your actual, true purpose of deen. Like we talked about yesterday, or this morning, actually. I don't remember. Anyways, that shaitan and the powers that be in the kuffar and the mushrikeen, they care less about your salah and more about the system. If you know that शेर that Allama Iqbal said, मुल्ला को जो हिंद में है सजदे की इजाज़त, नादां ये समझता है कि इस्लाम है आज़ाद. So just because you have permission to do sajda, to pray, doesn't mean Islam is azad, Islam is free, Islam is established. It doesn't mean that. Right? So shaitan will primarily attack those big things, but it will also attack these small things if that big thing isn't there. So when the system of Islam isn't there, obviously shaitan doesn't need to attack the system because it just isn't present. Right? So then it will start attacking our personal things. Then it will start chipping away at namaz and zakat and roza and hajj and umrah and sadaqah and all of that. Right? It will start chipping away at those because obviously it doesn't need to achieve a big objective. The big objective is already achieved. We did it for him. He doesn't need to do it anymore. So the jihad against both your nafs and shaitan is important. And then on this level, on making yourself the servant of Allah and making your ibadah purely for Allah. The third aspect you have to do jihad against is against a bad environment, a bad ma'ashara, right? And if we look around ourselves, honestly tell me, in a day, how many people you meet, and what percentage of those people advise you towards khair, and what percentage of those people advise you towards evil? What percentage of those people will encourage you towards haram relationships and music and gossip and backbiting? And what percentage of those people will encourage you and invite you and advise you for namaz and Quran and jihad and fulfilling your religious obligations? What percentage? So it's this environment, it's this society that we need to do jihad against as well. Just in order to ensure that we as a person, as an individual, we're not even talking about ensuring that people outside can become ibadur rahman, become servants of God. We're not even at that step yet. Even just to be a true and complete servant of God, even just to purify our own ibadah, to fully become a servant of Allah in true form and meaning and manner, we need to do jihad against society as well. Because society doesn't let us be a true servant of God. It is heavily, heavily corrupted, right? So, jihad against these three things, against our nafs, against shaitan, and against a corrupt society, just for the sake of ourselves being good, honest servants of Allah, as is His right. Right? And then, at this stage, what does being His servants mean? It means, first of all, to accept, to declare. Islam is basically salama or taslim, to accept that yes, I am Allah is my God, He is my creator. Whatever commands He gives, I have to fulfill. That is Islam. Then ita'at. Ita'at is that, okay, now, since He is my creator and my God and the King of all worlds and the controller and the ruler and all of His attributes, because of that, now I need to obey Him. Right? I need to make sure that everything in my life is in accordance with His commandments. Then fourth aspect is taqwa, that I need to fear Him. I need to constantly be seeking His approval and fearing His wrath, fearing Him being upset with me. Because if I lose that fear, I am not going to be able to keep up with my deeds. I'm not going to be able to... If I lose the fear of upsetting Allah, I will end up upsetting Allah. You get the point? And then finally, ibadat. Now, we need to sort of come out of that basic definition of ibadat that we have, that namaz, roza, zakat, and hajj are the only forms of ibadah. No. Ibadat, in its true meaning, ibadat means to submit. Abd means servant, slave. If you are Abdullah, if you are the slave of Allah, what does a slave do? A slave does not just do sajda to his master. That's not the only thing a slave must do. A slave must obey his master in every way, in every command, in the letter of the law and in the spirit of the law. you must obey Allah, and you must obey Him knowingly, understandingly, and lovingly. You must actually have that, like the peak of Iman is when you obey Allah, you are satisfied and content in your own heart that yes, I'm doing the good thing. Yes, I'm doing the right thing. This is something I need to be doing. Right? You feel the love for Allah in that moment. And complete obedience in everything. You can't pray and make the claim, you can't, in every rak'ah of every salah, we say, إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ. We only worship you, we only like do our ibadah to you. إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ. And we only ask you for help. We only seek help from you. And after saying إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ, we only worship you, you can't go out and then partake in a business that uses interest and commit fraud and give bribes and lie and cheat and do a whole host of everything that we do and still consider that ibadat. That isn't ibadat. I mean, let's be honest. Think back to that hadith that I brought up in discussion about Abdud Dinar and Abdud Darham. The Prophet said, may Abdud Dinar and Abdud Darham, the slave of, the Abd of Dinar and Darham, the currencies of the time, be destroyed, be annihilated. And what does that mean? I mean, if we take it in the sense of Abd that we mean now in ibadah, that it's only namaz and roza and zakat and hajj, no one bows down, no one does sujood to wealth, to dinar and dirham. No one fasts for dinar and dirham. No one gives zakat to dinar and dirham. No one does hajj of dinar and dirham. So what does ibadat mean? Ibadat means making it your sole purpose. That as long as I'm achieving this, all other rules can be compromised. As long as, this is being achieved. That as long as money is coming in, sure, like interest is haram, but money is coming in. So, I mean, why wouldn't I take interest? And sure, I mean, bribery is haram, but it cuts through the red tape. It gets me my money quicker. So why wouldn't I give it? That is Abdud Dinar. You're actually a slave to your wealth now. You're not a slave to Allah. You can continue to pray, and you can continue to declare إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ, and you can continue to do as much ruku and sujood as you like, but you're not actually a slave to Allah. You're just not. You're not, in effect, you're not. Right? Anyways, so this is like the stage 1 of making sure you yourself are a slave, a servant of Allah. Now we come to stage 2. And what is that? Inviting others to the deen of Allah, to this deen as a system of life, to inviting others to be servants of Allah. And how will this be done? The tool remains the same. The tool remains Quran and Jihad. Right? And at this stage, the jihad will be done against 3 things, or, well, not exactly against, but essentially the title of jihad here, as Dr. Sarp puts it, is basically to counter, to answer, to destroy the false philosophies and beliefs we have, the ways of life, the philosophies, the isms and schisms of today. The philosophy of secularism, separation of church and state, liberalism, feminism, transgenderism, the whole LGBTQ, I don't know, whatever, how many more letters they put in that now. But that whole philosophy and belief system. Countering that is how you do jihad at this stage, at the da'wat stage. So when you're inviting other people to deen, to being servants of Allah, you're using three tools basically. First of all, you're using hikmat. Now, what is hikmat? Hikmat is logic in a way. So, actually, let's do Mawizay Hasana first. Mawizay Hasana is, if you like directly translate it, it's like good advice. It's nasiha. So it's your general lectures, your, basically, for the vast majority of the people, as long as you give them, a few emotional points, something from Quran and Hadith, it makes their iman, and they will generally agree with you. You don't need to give them fully sound, logical, philosophical arguments to like have them accept that a certain philosophy is wrong and why deen is correct, right? You don't have to fully have a full logical academic level argument with them for why secularism is wrong. You can just tell them that, Allah says, Inil hukmu illa lillah, that all the true authority and only true authority, absolute authority of hukum and power and control is for Allah. So how come we do this separation of church and state thing where we say that no, Islam can stay in the masajid, but the government is of the people, for the people, by the people, that we will make laws and philosophies and we don't need any religion telling us what to do. So as long as you give them like solid arguments from the Quran and Hadith, and just generally, Mawwizah Hasana is basically beautiful words of nasiha, advice, that works for the masses, that works for most people, right? So that is one tool. But then there are some people who, the word Dr. Israr uses is the intellectual elite, the brain trust of the people. And those are the people who are, for the most part, highly educated in their fields, highly conventionally educated. They need actual logical arguments. This Mawwizah Hasana doesn't work for them. They're like, this is all emotional talk, but there's no actual substance behind it, right? So for them, you need hikmah. You need actual arguments. You need logic. You need a whole debate and an academic level discussion. But these are still people with good hearts. Like, they don't generally want bad for deen. They don't want to spread fitna. But in their minds, in their logical brains, what they've been taught is that, these philosophies, secularism, liberalism, these are all good things. And for these arguments, right? They have read the philosophy in political science and sociology and everything in benefit of all of these. Now, if you want to convince them, and these are the intellectual elite, is actually the people you need to convince if you want to bring a revolution, right? So if you want to convince them, you need hikmah, you need logic, you need arguments, you need dalail, you need evidence. And that is a whole separate thing. Like, it's not Mawwizah Hasana, it's something very different. So that is what hikmah is for. And for this, we need specialized people. We need people who are willing to actually sit down. We need smart people. We need intellectual people, people of the same level of intellectual elites, right? And these people will need to, first of all, have a strong, solid base foundation of Quran and Islamic principles. And then we'll need these people to study and research and fully understand these philosophies as well. to understand what liberalism is, to understand what secularism is, to understand what the arguments and what the entire logical basis for this system is. And then to challenge it, to counter it. Because without knowing, you can't challenge it, right? I mean, I could tell you that Islam is good and a perfect system, but you'll be like, okay, but like, you didn't prove anything to me. You didn't show me why secularism is wrong or why Islam is correct. So we need people for this purpose, for the hikmah, for challenging the intellectual elite, for convincing them. We need people who are willing to sacrifice their careers, sacrifice their lives, to actually spend time and effort and put this effort into understanding these philosophies and then challenging these philosophies, to countering these narratives of all of these problems of secularism, of liberalism, of feminism, of transgenderism, all of these, right? And then at the end, after both of those people, after both of these groups, the intellectual elite and the masses, the public, you have the people who are hell-bent on spreading fitna. The mawizah hasana doesn't work on them. The hikmah doesn't work on them. They are not gonna accept your dalal. They are essentially, you could call them enemies of Islam, in a way, because they just want to oppose Islam. They're not gonna accept. And for them, now you need jidal hasana or mujadila ahsan. What is mujadila? Mujadila is debate, or like essentially debate, or in a way what you call confrontation. So at an academic level, you know that this person won't accept it, but this is to be done in public, so the public can see both sides of the argument, both sides of the discussion, and the public can see that the fitna they're spreading is wrong, right? So, and again, for this, we also need people who can give their entire lives to learning how to debate, to learning what the fitna they're spreading actually is, to learning what their philosophy, what their argument, what their logic is, and then to counter it. We need people, this needs big sacrifice, right? So these are the three ways and the three, call it fields of jihad that are to be done in the aspect of da'wat, of calling people, inviting people to be servants of Allah. And there are four aspects to this as well, the four pillars. They are tabligh, so spreading the message of Allah. Balagha yuballighu, tabligh. Tabligh is just making sure it reaches them. Then da'wat. Now da'wat is invitation, right? Calling them to prayer. Calling them to, let's say, a Quran lecture. Calling them, pulling them with you to some place where Allah may guide them, to a lecture, a Quran class, a Quran circle, somewhere where there is suhbatul salihin, company of good people, of salihin. So that's da'wat. And then amr bil ma'ruf wa nahi anil munkar. Now, this is a word that's used a lot and also misunderstood a lot. Amr bil ma'ruf is advising others, commanding others, telling others to do good. Ma'ruf, to do good. Wa nahi anil munkar, and stopping, telling people not to do munkar. Munkar is bad, something that's negative, evil. Now, enjoining good and forbidding evil. This is a whole topic on its own. But in essence, we need to understand that this is going to be both. We covered this in the tools section. that hikmah and mawazay hasana, that is amal bil ma'ruf wa nahi anil munkar. You tell people that interest is haram. You tell them, no, like when it comes to mawazay hasana, you tell people interest is haram because Allah said this and the Prophet said this, and Allah says in the Quran that interest is waging a war against Allah and His Messenger. And there's a hadith that says that there are 70 parts of the sin of interest, consuming interest, and the smallest of those parts is as if you committed zina, adultery, with your mother. So you say this much to the general public, and for the most part, the work is done. That is that is nahi anil munkar for them. That's mawazay hasana. But when it comes to hikmah, when it comes to the intellectual elite, they will be like, okay, that's fine. You gave me religious references. Now, make me understand why is this haram? What is the problem with interest? Then you'll have to pull up. Then we'll need someone who knows finance, someone who knows economy, someone who knows what is the actual principle of interest, how it works, what are the effects it has on the economy, who it benefits, who it harms. We need someone with that knowledge to be able to counter that narrative, right? Like they will say that, like the intellectual elite, they will say that interest helps the economy. The one who takes the interest knows they're going to have to pay interest. The one who gives the interest earns from it. What's the problem with it? And like, I'll be honest, I can't answer that. Like, genuinely speaking, I cannot make a solid enough argument against that to even convince myself. Right? Other than it's just haram. You just, you're Muslim, why can't you just accept that? But some people can. You need to satisfy their logical mind. So that is then the requirement for hikmah then. And the last part, we did amal bil ma'ruf nahi anil munkar. Now shahadat ala nas. Now we've already talked like a bit about shahadat ala nas in previous discussions. But shahadat ala nas is basically establishing your testimony against the people. Or, no, not against is a negative word, but over the people, essentially. So you can establish the testimony that, oh Allah, I did my part. My part was making sure they get your message. My part was mawazay hasana. My part was hikmah. My part was mujadala ahsan. My part was inviting them. My part was amar bil ma'ruf and nahi anil munkar. I did that. Now, if these people come to your deen, if these people accept, then I will be, then like obviously I am a witness in their favor. But if they still don't accept it, if they still don't come, if they still don't follow your deen, then I am a testifier, I am a witness against them. Because they understood your deen, they fully had all concept of what your deen is. And, like I told them, I made sure that they knew what they needed to do, what was right, what was wrong. But I obviously can't control them. That then is their part. They did not fulfill their part, but I fulfilled my part. So that is shahadat al-nas, that you are now a witness over them. Either for them or against them, but that is on them, not on you. Okay. This is 2 stories of the building. The first story, the first level was yourself being a slave of Allah. The second story was inviting others, making sure that others are a slave of Allah as well. the last part is iqamat deen, of establishing the deen. Now, we discussed this a bit in the discussions as well. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did not go to each person in Arabia and hold them and invite them to Allah. He didn't go to each and every person. He didn't even go to each and every person in Medina. And I would say probably in Mecca as well. I'm not sure about that. He could have. Why? What did he do? What was his way of da'wat? His way of da'wat was to establish a system. He did, and don't get me wrong, he didn't like completely disregard da'wat as well. He did a lot of da'wat. He did da'wat better than all of us combined can do da'wat, right? But at the time when da'wat was needed, when a system was not being established, we're talking in the time of Mecca, he did da'wat. He did pure da'wat, right? But when in Medina, the first thing he did was he established the system, the deen, as a system of life. Now, you no longer need to go to each and every single person and give them da'wah. Why? Because the system is in place. A system which makes ma'roof easy, which makes doing good easy, and makes the munkar hard, makes the evil things hard. So now, if someone is choosing munkar, they are actually responsible for it themselves. Because you're actually going out of your way to do munkar. It's harder to do munkar and you're still doing munkar. And it's easier to do ma'roof and you're still not doing ma'roof. Now, the onus is on you. Because once the deen is established, once the system of life is conducive to Islam, is conducive to ma'roof, is conducive to khair, then not doing khair and then not following Islam and then not doing ma'roof, that is now a major crime, right? Now you don't have a excuse that, oh, I didn't know what to do. Yes, you knew what to do. You were told very clearly. The system itself told you what to do. Okay, an example I like to give for this is, imagine, and this becomes personal because this is a fight I'm still fighting. But anyways, in school, let's say you have classes till 2, right? And Dhuhr prayer time with Jamaat, with congregation, is at 1:30. Now it is harder to do ma'roof, which is go and attend the prayer and go and be part of the prayer with Jamaat, and easier to do the munkar, which is skip the Jamaat. And Jamaat is wajib for males, right? So it's easier to do the munkar, to do the wrong thing, and harder to do the right thing, to go and pray. But let's say the school institutes a prayer break at that time. And they clearly state that this break is for prayer. Let's say from 1:30 to 1:40, 10 minutes are for prayer. Now, it's easy to do ma'roof and harder to do munkar. Because let's say there's a prayer break, so a good number of people are going for prayer. Now, and especially if someone invites you, especially if someone says, okay, let's go for prayer. Now what do? Now if you say, no, I don't really want to pray, now you are responsible yourself. Once that break is given, that break essentially is an invitation in itself to go pray, right? Once that break is given, once that system is conducive to praying and you still don't pray, now you're responsible yourself. Now there's no onus of responsibility on anyone else. And don't get me wrong, if the system is not conducive, that's still not like justification for you not praying. You will still be responsible for not praying. However, the responsibility will be shared in, the punishment will be shared in by whoever was in control of changing that, of allowing that, right? So anyways, the argument was that if a system is conducive to good and inconducive to bad, and you still choose bad, then you are responsible yourself. So that is why, and we've already established the whole argument for why establishing the deen and jihad for that is necessary, so I won't go into that again. But this was just a brief, call it, recap. So, yes, iqamat-e-deen is necessary for this reason as well. Now, how are you going to do iqamat-e-deen? So we've already seen the first story of becoming a slave of Allah yourself, of inviting others to be a slave of Allah, the second story. Now the third story, establishment of deen, iqamat-e-deen. At this level, again, the tools are the same, Quran and jihad. At the individual level, you need Quran for your own tazkir, your own tazkiyah, your own purification, your own reminder that, I need to constantly remind myself that, okay, Allah is my Lord, I need to worship Him, I need to make sure my entire life is in accordance with Him. Remind myself of His commands, that all is going to be done with Quran, right? Same at the da'wat level. The da'wat is to be done with Quran. The tabshir, the glad tidings, are to be done with Quran. The indhar, the warnings, are to be given with Quran. The hikmah is to be taken from Quran. The hikmah, or if it's not directly in Quran, it's to be sourced from Quran. The evidences are to be given from Quran. The mawzai hasana, the good advice, the nasiha, is to be taken from Quran. We need to root ourselves in Quran, because when we try and move away from the Quran, I think this is a hadith, I'm not sure. And these aren't exact words, but Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said something to the effect of, if you try and find guidance or hidayah anywhere other than the Quran, Allah will lead you astray. Right? Allah will lead you towards dhalala. So that is, we need to literally take this hadith and tie it to ourselves. Urdu mein kehte hain na कि पल्लू से बांध लो इसको, कि there's no other way, there's no other guidance, there's no other option other than Quran. You want to invite someone, you want to do da'wah, you do it with Quran. You want to do jihad, you do it with Quran. You want to give evidences, mawzai hasana, you do it with Quran. You want to extract hikmah, you do it from Quran. You do amr bil ma'roof and nahi anil munkar, you do it from Quran. Everything is to be done from Quran. And this holds for the third level as well. For iqamat-e-deen, your tools are the same, Quran and jihad. Now, at this level, there are 3 steps. So, and these will relate very succinct. Let me actually build up the relation with the previous level. In the previous level, once you're doing da'wah will include inviting people to Allah. And once you invite people to Allah and they sort of start understanding this same philosophy, the same understanding of deen, that deen needs to be established, deen needs to be, there needs to be لِيَقُومَ النَّاسُ بِالْقِسْطِ, people need to establish justice, and لِيُظْهِرَهُ عَلَى الدِّينِ كُلِّ, that this deen needs to be established over over every other deen, every other system of life. Then, once they understand this, and once you need to understand that this task, this iqamat-e-deen, this establishment of deen, it cannot happen alone. You can't do it alone. You cannot challenge a system alone. You cannot change a system alone. You need a group, a jama'at, a sort of a group basically of like-minded individuals and of people who have the same fiqh, the same philosophy, the same concern as you, who want to achieve the same goal as you, which is iqamat deen, right? Once you do that, once you invite people, once you form that jama'ah, that group, then you need to train that group. Training, it will come in the same level as da'wat, because you're giving them warnings from Quran, you're giving them glad tidings from Quran, you're doing tafkir bil Quran, you're doing amr bil ma'ruf, nahi anil munkar, tabligh, shahad al nas. You do all of this, you hammer the Islamic principles and belief into them. They will obviously have a level of tarbiyah, have a level of iman, have a level of, they will have a certain know-how of what to do, right? Then, once you have that jama'at, actually once that jama'at is in the building phase, you will automatically, in a way, step into the third story of this building, which is of passive resistance. Because people will start, it will start innocently. So people will start with taunts, with, oh, what are you doing? Like, what is this? Why are you trying to be so Maulvi? And, what is this? Why are you trying to be so Islamic? And, what is this pointless stuff? There will be name calling, there will be taunts, you will be made fun of, you will be, like literally everything. If you look at the Prophet's life in Mecca, what did it start with? It started with making fun of him, ridiculing him. Oh, this is just a phase, right? Then it came to taunts and insults and ruining his reputation. That, oh, he has been like, he's under the, what did they say? He's under the effect of sihr, of magic. Or he is a magician, or a kahin, or a sha'ir, a poet. And he learns from some Christian scholar and then just relays the same to us. Or he is like some magician. That was the biggest thing, that either he is under the effect of someone's magic, or he is himself a magician. And magicians are generally taken in the bad sense, even now. So, taunts and insults. And then, once the taunts and insults don't work, there will be torture. The companions of the Prophet were tortured. We have all read and heard the stories of what happened in Mecca. We have the story of Khabab bin al-Arat, radiallahu anhu, who was laid bareback on burning coals, and the only relief he got was when his skin was burnt and the fat melted off his back and cooled the coals somewhat. We have all heard the stories of Ali Yasir, the family of Yasir and his wife Sumayya and his child Ammar, radiyallahu anhum. The parents, both Hazrat Yasir radiyallahu anhu and Hazrat Sumayya radiyallahu anhuma, companions of the Prophet, brutally tortured and killed in Mecca. We have all heard those, right? But, and actually, we have all heard those doesn't do justice to them. Those stories need to be repeated. We need to have those in our mind. Abu Jahl, just for the sake of their Islam, they didn't do anything. They weren't even Qurayshis. They weren't even Qarshis. They weren't even from Quraysh. They were living under the protection of Abu Jahl. And when Abu Jahl found out that they accepted Islam, what did he do? He tied Hazrat Sumayya to a pillar in front of her son Ammar, radiallahu anhu, stripped her naked in front of her son, tortured her, asking her to renounce Islam. She spat on his face. He said, in the sense that I won't do it. You can do whatever you want. He took his spear and stabbed her in her private parts until she died. And what he did with the father, Hazrat Yasir, radiallahu anhu, was he tied 4 of his limbs to 4 separate camels and made them run in 4 separate directions. Just imagine what would have happened with the body. There were literally scraps of it left, scattered all over the place. This is the legacy of Islam. This is what was happening in Mecca when the order was kuffu aydiyakum, keep your hands tied. You think the ghaira of Hazrat Abu Bakr wasn't rising? You think it did not hurt Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to see this happening? And what did he say to Ali Yasir? He said, Isbiru Ali Yasir. Have sabr. Be patient. This is just, we need to imagine this is what was happening in Mecca. And what were they doing? They were being patient. They did not retaliate. They did not raise their hands. They did not. We cannot even imagine the level of patience those people had. But that was passive resistance. When the order is kuffu aydiyakum, you do not raise your hands. And what is this doing? We need to understand what is this doing. There are 3 groups whenever a revolutionary movement comes to light. There are the supporters of the revolutionary movement, and there's the opposition. In the topic of Iqamat-e-Deen, there will be kuffar and mu'mineen. But there's a 3rd group of the silent majority, right? Those who neither support the revolutionary party nor the ones who are trying to kill them, destroy them, annihilate them. When you are doing passive resistance, when you are having sabr, and when you are still being tortured, but you are not retaliating, but you are not raising arms, then what message is being received by the silent majority? They are seeing that an innocent group is being tortured, being killed, being harmed, being oppressed, being annihilated. For what? They aren't doing anything. They aren't harming anyone. They aren't disturbing the peace. So what are they doing? What is their crime? What are they being punished for? So this passive resistance wins the hearts and minds of the silent majority at a time when the revolutionary party, the people who want to bring change, the people who want to challenge the system, are not yet aren't numerous enough and aren't trained, aren't ready basically to challenge the system directly. When you aren't ready for active resistance, you do passive resistance. And this way you win hearts and minds. This is what we call the war of hearts and minds. In this day and age, this is especially important. Wars these days are not won on the battlefield. They are won in hearts and minds. Right? So this is for as long as your Jama'at, your group, isn't ready for the level of change that is needed to bring about the system, to challenge the system by force, as long as your group is still in the preparatory phase, what you need to do is passive resistance. Now, once your group is ready, once you have enough people and they are trained enough, now you go towards active resistance. Now, what is active resistance? Active resistance, in light of the seerah, is immediately after coming to Medina. What did the Prophet do? Firstly, he established a treaty of protection, a defense pact basically within Medina. He got all the tribes together, the Muslim tribes as well, and the Jewish tribes as well. He was like, yes, we have our differences, but we live in this one city, and if this city is attacked, then we are together in its defense. So he got even the opposing tribes into a defense pact with that. So he basically sorted home matters first, and then he sent out campaigns to basically actively interfere in the Quraysh. What did they do? They blocked trade caravans. They blocked trade routes. They scouted out, they followed, they intercepted their trade missions. And this is like a very well established rule. You want to mess with someone, mess with their economy, mess with their money. So, and Medina was a strategically very important place because it was very close to and had access to all the trade routes that the Quraysh used. So this was a major step, major active resistance, major interference in the system of Quraysh, right? So when we say that Muslims initiated Badr, this is what we mean. The Quraysh would have been perfectly fine because Rasulullah wasn't in their hair anymore. He was in Medina, he was in a different city. They didn't care what was happening. Why would they care, right? But after coming to Medina, the Prophet sent out missions. He was like, intercept this trade caravan, block that trade route, go and follow and scout and see what this caravan does, what this mission does. And those missions are, in those 2 years, those missions are what built up to Badr, what eventually led to Badr, right? And I have already discussed this in one of the previous discussions, so I won't go into too much detail. But essentially, this is what we mean by active resistance. Challenge something that is important to the current system. What was important to the current system at that time? Their money, their trade caravans, right? What was the Quraysh was the system, right? The Quraysh was the system of life back then. They were the authority. So you challenged them. The Prophet challenged them, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. How did he challenge them? By messing with their trade routes, by messing with their trade caravans. In response to that, now that system, that authority, that system of battle, or the system of evil, will try to retaliate, will respond with their full force and might. They will come to destroy you. They will come to annihilate you. That is what Badr was. In a way, it isn't wrong to say that we fought Badr in self-defense, but it's slightly misleading because, yes, we fought Badr in self-defense, but we provoked them. We literally forced them to come fight us. So, yes, Badr was in self-defense, but just saying that Badr was in self-defense is a misleading way to put it, is a misleading way to state it. We provoked them to come fight us, and then we were like, okay, now you started the fight, we didn't start it. We sort of got the moral high ground. So this was strategy, this was hikmah. So this is step 2 in terms of iqamat-e-deen. After passive resistance, active resistance. Challenge something that is like important to them, that is important to the system. When you do that, when you challenge them, then the system will come after you with their full force and might. They will come with the army of 1,000 people to Badr. Then you will have to fight. Then is the last step, which is conflict, an armed conflict. Qital. This is the level of qital now. That now you have to fight. Now, qital at that time was simpler. Why? Because the opposition was kuffar. So you could kill them, right? Now, in this day and age, qital is slightly harder, is slightly more restricted. You cannot take up arms against a Muslim ruler as per most scholars of fiqh. And even the ones that do allow it, place very, 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 very strict conditions on when you can do it. And those conditions are still not fulfilled even in this time, even in this era of fitna. No matter how bad things are right now, those conditions are still not fulfilled. Those are such strict conditions. And this is masla khuruj if someone wants to study fiqh in detail. But anyways, so we can't raise up. So still active resistance still is the same. That you challenge something that is important to them. That point stays the same. At the time of Rasulullah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, at our time, and in the future, whenever it happens. Those two steps, passive resistance, active resistance, remain the same. What needs to be tweaked is qital. Why? Because our opposition is not against kuffar, it is against Muslims. Can't take up arms against Muslims. So at this level, we will use our numbers to our advantage. We will be like, we cannot accept to live in this system of evil, the system of batil. We cannot accept that our state bank operates on interest. We cannot accept that our parliament can run when it makes laws against the Quran and Sunnah. Right? We cannot accept this. We won't allow it to run. So if you want to torture us, if you want to imprison us, if you want to kill us, you can do it, but we won't allow it. And then that challenge is basically, and this is the stage where victory is not guaranteed, right? So whenever there is mention of qital in Islam, in the Quran and all, there will, like very near, in most instances, very immediately after it or very soon after it, there will be a mention of fawzul azim and reward in the akhirah. Why? Because a reward for qital in this dunya is not guaranteed. You may fight and you may lose. When you step down to qital, when you have done passive resistance, active resistance, and then qital, now there are two outcomes. There's takht or takhta, which means you either win and you come into power, you come into authority, or you lose and takhta is basically you're hanged. So those two are both equally valid opportunity, outcomes. Those both can happen. They're equally likely. But what we need to remember is just because we did not succeed in this world, in this dunya, that does not mean that our efforts were for nothing. We made the effort, we did our part. There is fawzul azim for us, inshallah, in the akhirah. It doesn't matter if we win, if we succeed, if we actually achieve our mission, our goal in this world or not. Our responsibility is not the establishment of deen. Our responsibility is to strive for the establishment of deen. Our responsibility is jihad. Our responsibility is not iqamat-e-deen. Okay? So this is a very lengthy topic. I've been speaking for an hour and 9 minutes now. I'm seeing the timer. But this is the methodology. This is what we get from Seerah. And again, I'll repeat this again. This is all for the vast majority of its part is Dr. Israr's work and what he has taken from, what he's extracted from Sirah, from Sirat, from the life of the Prophet. You have every right to disagree with it. You have every right to say that these conclusions are wrong. But merely saying that these conclusions are wrong is sort of like a pointless thing. So if you think these conclusions are wrong, that's completely valid. But think about it and bring evidence to support why these conclusions are wrong, or bring better conclusions that you think are the right conclusions, right? If you can do that, and if you can defend those conclusions, then, I mean, you have every right to that. And you may very well be right, and this may very well be wrong. This isn't like absolute. This can very well be wrong, this can very well be mistaken. But I would say give it an open thought and like think about it. Think why, if you think this is wrong, why is it wrong? And if this is wrong, then what is right? So anyways, we discussed the fields of jihad and how the steps, right? Now, the outcome, the aspect that we're expecting or we want to do. First is takbir Rabb. Now takbir, look at the root word of takbir is kabara. Kabara means to takbir in like literal meaning, if you go to the dictionary meaning, would mean to make Allah big, to make Allah greater, to make Allah greatest. But Allah is already the greatest, right? So what does takbir mean in that sense then? To make sure, like Allah is the greatest, in fact, in like de facto, but is that reflected in our system and in our belief and in our actions? So we need to make sure that our system actually puts Allah on top, actually accepts Allah as the greatest, as Akbar. We say Allahu Akbar, that's fine, but do we actually accept it? Do we actually accept His commands over everything else? Is His command the biggest, the greatest, the most important above everything else? Or is something else more important? Then Iqamat Deen, which is, we've like talked about it, establishing the Deen. Idhare Deeni Haqq. Now this is a term taken from Surah Saf Ayah 9. لِيُظْهِرَهُ عَلَى الدِّينِ كُلِّهِ. So لِيُظْهِرَهُ is the same root as idhar. So making sure that this system, Deen al-Haqqi, is established over every other deen, over every other system of life. And then وَيَكُونَ الَّذِينَ وَيَكُونَ الدِّينُ كُلَّهُ لِلَّهِ. And I forget the reference of this, but this will be in this book if you want to go through it later on. So, and if you, I will share it. So that the deen can be kull, completely for Allah. The system of life is completely for Allah. And this is similar to Idhar Deen al-Haqqi, that actually this is more in line with in al-hukmu illa lillah. That all hukum, all authority, absolute authority is for Allah. So the complete system of life is also for Allah. We need to make sure, our striving, our efforts, our jihad should be for the purpose that deen, the system of life, should be made specific and made solely for Allah. That is وَيَكُونَ الدِّينُ كُلَّهُ لِلَّهِ. And in terms of the pillars, the 4 pillars of Islam, namaz, roza, zakat, hajj. If we look at the vertical columns here, we see that namaz is conflicting with, the 2 arrows meet, is in opposition of azadi. Azadi is freedom, liberalism. So when you stand 5 times a day in front of your Lord and you bow, you do ruku and you do sujood, and you say Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'een, that is a refresher of the fact that you are not free. You are not liberalism doesn't work. You are not free. You are slaves of Allah. You must remember that, right? It is a counter to this freedom ideology, this liberal ideology. What is zakat in countering? Zakat is countering materialism or the love of dunya. I keep messing this up. So materialism or the love of dunya, hubbe dunya, is basically the antithesis of zakat. So zakat, the root word for zakat is the same as the root for tazkiyah. Tazkiyah is purification. So to purify two things: A, to purify your wealth, and B, to purify your heart from the love of wealth. To remove materialism, to make sure that you aren't becoming abdul dinar and abdul dirham. That is what zakat is for. Then roza, saum, fasting, is a counter to following your nafs, basically. For nafs parasti, it is a counter to, okay, you need to now kill yourself a bit, kill your nafs a bit, weaken it. That you need to sort of, and this is another, if I get a chance to discuss the purpose and the philosophy of fasting a bit later on, after this challenge is completed, the 30 Juz challenge, this will come up again, that the philosophy of fasting is so that your nafs, this body, this nafs, is sort of weakened a bit. You take food away from it, you take water away from it, you weaken this body, you weaken this physical existence. Why? So that it gives space to the ruh, to the spiritual existence to sort of rise, to sort of come up. And what we essentially do is 11 months of the year, we feed this jism, this nafs. We give it everything that it wants. We give it food, we give it water, we give it like all sorts of, we fulfill all of its demands, right? This 1 month, the philosophy of fasting is weaken it. And weakening it isn't something that's supposed to go alone, right? You will see that whenever Ramadan is mentioned, very close by is mentioned that this Quran was sent down in Ramadan. Why was it sent down in Ramadan? What is so special about Ramadan that the Quran is so closely linked with it? And what link does fasting have with the Quran? Well, also where in the ayat in Surah Al-Baqarah, if I remember correctly, where Allah says that يا أيها الذين آمنوا كتب عليكم الصيام كما كتب على الذين من قبلهم من قبلكم. I don't exactly remember the ayah, but basically where Allah says that, oh, you have believed, oh, the believers, oh, the people of Iman, fasting has been enjoined upon you, has been made obligatory upon you, as was made obligatory upon the people before you, لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ, so that you may have taqwa, so that you may be of those who have taqwa. Now, where will this taqwa come from? In the ayat following this, immediately following this, Allah says that fasting doesn't go alone. When you're fasting during the day, in the month of Ramadan, the nights you're supposed to spend in Qiyamul Layl. You're supposed to spend with Quran. And what the Quran actually says is spend half of the night, or a little bit less, or a little bit more. So this notion of ours that we spend an hour or at most an hour and a half at Taraweeh, and that is enough Qiyamul Layl, that is, I would say, slightly against Quran and Sunnah, right? So we need to sort of understand that so again, I've sort of gone on a tangent here, but basically the point of fasting is to weaken this physical existence, and then because you're fasting during the day, and then also with this fasting is qiyamul layl, is to spend time with the Quran during the nights, so that you can strengthen this ruh, this spiritual existence. So it's not just weakening the body, it's strengthening the soul along with it. Just weakening the body is pointless, because what's the purpose of that? You're just not eating and you're just not drinking. There's no benefit to that, right? Allah doesn't want you to stay hungry. That's not the point. Allah wants you to kill a little bit of this physical existence, this nafs, and let the ruh come out a bit. Let the ruh breathe a bit. Let the ruh feed the ruh a bit. The food of this ruh is Quran. The food of this, a very beautiful way I've heard this put was, this Quran mentions, it's, I don't recall the exact reference ayah, but the Quran refers to itself as ruh. The Quran refers to Hazrat Jibreel alayhi salam as ruh. تنزل الملائكة والروح in Surah Qadr. إنا أنزلناه في ليلة القدر. It says, we have sent, Allah says, we send it. What am I missing? Basically, Allah sends down malaikatu wa ruhu, angels, and ar-ruh, Hazrat Jibreel alayhi salam. If you read the translation, it says Jibreel alayhi salam there. So he is referred to as ruh. Quran is referred to as ruh, and who is it? So basically, what's being revealed, the Quran, is ruh. Who is bringing it is ruh, and who it's being given to, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's being delivered directly on his heart. That is where the ruh is. The heart is the home of the ruh, right? The residence, the home, it is the home of the ruh, essentially. So the ruh is being delivered. It's being delivered by the ruh, and it's being delivered to the ruh. It's all ruh, ruh, ruh. So if this Quran is ruh, that is the food for our ruh, for our spiritual existence. We need to feed it this Quran, this ruh. As our body needs food, our ruh needs Quran. So that's the philosophy of fasting in very few words. And Hajj. Hajj is a counter to nationalism. How? When you go to Hajj, you all wear the same clothes. You wear ihram, right? It's 2 pieces of cloth. You all shave your heads. You all wear sandals which are very simple and which cover very little of your feet. You remove all symbols of status, wealth, ego, nationality, race, importance, everything. Everyone stands in the same saf and prays to the same God in the same attire, in the same way, in the same direction, and does the same things at the same time. When it's time to leave Makkah and go to Mina and then go to Muzdalifah and go to all the manasik Hajj, they are all done at the same time, in the same way, in the same clothes, in the same manner, at the same time, all together. Them all saying the same thing, Labbaik Allahumma Labbaik. Allah, you called and I am here. I responded. So that basically is a very strong counter to nationalism, that Muslims are one ummah. You don't need to identify by your nation. You don't need to identify yourselves by your race, by your creed, by your sect. You aren't Shia, you aren't Sunni, you aren't Barelvi, you aren't Deobandi, whatever it is. The Quran says, call yourselves Muslims. We chose the name Muslims for you. Call yourselves Muslims. Identify yourselves as Muslims. So, Hajj is, because it fosters that unity, it is a counter to nationalism, to national boundaries, to boundaries of race, to boundaries of to boundaries of like lineage, to boundaries of family, to boundaries of status, class, society, everything. Remove all those boundaries and be one ummah. That is what Hajj is for. That is the purpose, the philosophy of Hajj. So when we truly understand the purpose behind these pillars, then we can truly fulfill them as is the haqq of fulfilling them, as the right to of them to be fulfilled. And I'm really sorry this is becoming very, very long, but this is a very, very important topic. We can, like, in the last, 25 days, 24, 25 days, we built up that jihad and qital is important. Why is it important? We did the whole thing. But if we do not discuss how to do jihad and qital, where are we even standing? What are we even doing? we understood that it's important, but we don't know how to do it. This is how to do it. This is how it's supposed to be done. And again, some of this is core principles of Islam that you can't disagree with. Some of it is more modern, more recent work of scholars, work of really great, really educated, really well-renowned scholars. But they were still humans, right? They could still have made errors. So you can disagree with it. You have every right to disagree with it. But don't just disagree for the sake of disagreeing. If you disagree, even if you don't bring it to me, or even if you don't bring it up in open discussion, at least try and justify your own mind and your own heart why you disagree with it. Give evidences and give a solid logical argument to your own heart. If you still hold to the same belief after that, then that's good. That's fine. If you can justify it to yourself, it's acceptable. But do be smart about it. Don't just follow your nafs. Don't just say, oh, I disagree because if I accept it, then I'll have to do all of this. I mean, that is sort of like following your nafs, right? You're just looking for an easy way out. So don't do that. But if you genuinely disagree, based on evidence and logic and argument, then fine. And I actually really appreciate if you bring it to me and I can look at your arguments, because maybe I am looking at it the wrong way and I can be corrected. So that is then benefit, and that is then reward and good deed for you. That is tawasi bil haqq on your part. So yeah, that was today's discussion, which went very long, and I'm sorry for taking up this much of your time. You can listen to this in parts. This isn't I don't think this will matter that much if you break it up into parts. But yeah, Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum. As always, questions are always welcome. Further discussion is always welcome. Anything you have to add, anything you want to ask, any discussion you want to, sort of go on a tangent about, everything is welcome. But because that is what enhances our iman, that is what makes sure that we are on the right path, and that is one of the most basic benefits of Jamaat and good gathering of Suhbatul Salihin. So anyways, that is it for today. Inshallah, I really, really hope and I really, really pray that what I was able to say, may Allah have had me fulfill my responsibility. And may Allah help you guys and me as well understand and implement it in our lives and truly be a service and a servant of Allah and truly work towards the service of Deen. جزاكم الله خيرا. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.